cultural areas, people want to be able to gather outside of their homes. And so you want to make it inviting, you want to make people feel comfortable there and quickly understanding, well, I can't do everything. I want to be able to do as much as I can, but in order to make all these projects successful, realistically, I can't do it all. We can still do great design even without it. Even if it's something where we've had conversations and the client's adamant this is the direction I want to go in, it's still our responsibility to deliver a strong project. Early on, having those conversations, asking what are their goals? Do they want us to explore solar panels?
What are younger architects and interns bringing into the profession right now that you think older generations might be underestimating? And what do you wish emerging designers understood earlier about the realities of practice?
What I'm seeing from a lot of younger professionals entering.
All right, on this episode of the On Center podcast, we're joined by Ashley Thornberry, Associate Partner at Studio Access, to talk about designing spaces that serve communities, support first responders, and create experiences people actually feel. From fire station design and civic architecture to shaping the next generation of architects, we'll dive into the experiences and ideas that have influenced her career and her approach to design. And as always, before any great design begins, somebody has to understand what already exists. That's where our sponsor, Map Solutions, comes in, helping architects and engineers capture the built world with reality capture 3D scanning and existing conditions documentation, because good design starts with good information. Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks
Thank,
for having me.
thank you for joining us. I'm glad you were able to make it. You've become known as sort of a fire station specialist, which is a fascinating niche because these buildings sit somewhere between civic architecture, industrial workflow, and emotional infrastructure. Firefighters don't just work there, they live there for long stretches at a time, decompress there after traumatic calls. And of course, after working on nearly a dozen fire stations, what have you learned about designing for human resilience, and what do most architects misunderstand about public safety architecture?
So designing for human resilience, really, it comes down to knowing the clients. What's great about working with fire departments and municipalities is that they are very involved with the design process. Essentially, a fire station can be a home away from home. They spend a lot of their time there, whether it is in a more administrative role, responding to calls, or as you mentioned, decompressing. And it's critical to understand what their needs are and how it functions. Space planning is one of the first things we do along with programming. And really, in fire stations, it's how can we be efficient with the spaces and essentially get from point A anywhere in the station to the apparatus bay as quick as possible, so that if they are responding to a call, there's no obstructions in their way, that they can be in a day room, they can be making a meal, they could be even sleeping, perhaps. But as soon as they're alerted, they're up, they're ready to go, and they can get where they're going as fast as possible.
Gotcha. You said knowing the client. So is each team of firefighters different?
Departments are different. While they may need the same spaces, really each department comes down to the culture and how they're structured, whether it's how many crew members, how many personnel may be on a shift. If it's a town-based department, a city-based, or rural, they all have different needs. Response time isn't into play. So do they have multiple stations? Is this a single station? Is it paid? Is it volunteer? And so these are all items that we talk through in our programming to make sure that what we're designing meets their needs, because one department may need something else. They may prioritize spaces, adjacencies than another. And so we never assume it's going to be the same, because it's not. And really, the culture of the fire department brings the stations to life. So it's great that we get to meet with those on shifts, not only the chiefs, but also those who are actually going to be living in the station and getting their input as well.
Interesting. So the cookie cutter approach is definitely not ideal.
It's not ideal. I mean, really, in design, we don't like to take the cookie cutter approach anyway. Different projects, depending on the repeat clients, you may have similar designs. Fire stations, again, functionality is similar, but the aesthetic is always going to be different. We really want it to reflect the community and where it's at. We want the personnel, we want the municipality, and then the community members that the department is serving to be proud of the station. And so contextually, we want to make sure that it fits in, that we go through site fits, making sure does this function correctly. Do we stay with the one story, or we forced into a two story, because that has implications with the design as well. And so on the interior side, again, from space planning, you may see some similarities if you get a chance to tour different stations, but really it's a result of what that department wants, so what that community needs. And our job as architects to make sure we're delivering that way.
Gotcha. Off the top of your head, if you can't, that's fine. But off the top of your head, can you think of a design choice that you made and the culture, the part of the culture that inspired it?
Yes. So one of the stations that we're working on right now and that's under construction, we regularly meet with the chief. So within the fire department, there's a design committee. And so we'll have a meeting. We'll go through the floor plan. We'll go through what the exterior is going to look like, interior finishes. As the fire department, they go back to the design committee and they often have more technical questions. Well, how is this going to function? For example, the day room, it's close to a kitchen and so we want to keep it open. But what if somebody's trying to make a meal and somebody's in the day room just kind of relaxing?
Mhm.
You want to be able to see one another, but you may want some separations in between. So we might do a partition so that it feels a little bit different. Another good one is with fitness rooms we found making it very visible from the corridor. Having a lot of natural daylight is really key, but even inside, you can see if somebody's in the room. And it's not to monitor them per se, but if something happens,
Sure.
being able to know where they're at. And so that's something that we've been seeing the visibility and having the places where if you need to decompress, whether that's an individual dorm room, a wellness room is something that we're incorporating quite a bit in our designs so that if anybody needs to, they have a space they can go, they can sit for however long they need to, and then get up and continue their day.
Fantastic example. You said in past interviews that emotion is one of the key metrics of good design, even for people who aren't directly involved with the project. That's not a phrase most architects use publicly, especially in an industry that often leans heavily into technical language and measurable performance. How do you personally evaluate whether a space feels right, and can emotion be designed intentionally, or is it something that emerges accidentally from good decisions?
I feel emotional design, it's really gonna be dependent on the end user, and really why I want to become an architect is how I remember growing up building spaces made me feel.
Really?
I remember being in spaces that brought me joy, that brought me happiness. I also remember being in spaces, that caused fear or discomfort, and at the time, not understanding exactly what an architect does, what architecture was, it kinda was a little hard for me to grasp my mind around it, but through school and knowing I want to be an architect, I've been very sensitive to how people feel in a space. Whether it's the body language, even just talking with a client, talking through their project while still in design, to seeing an end user walk into an area for the first time. And what I've learned about I'll say trying to measure emotional sense is that it's hard. It's not necessarily something that in my mind quantitative data can pull. It's a lot of asking, like, Matt, how are you feeling today in this space? And so more of a survey approach. But there are ways that our design can help influence that. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily getting lucky with it, but it is going through some practical approaches, anywhere from the finishes to the volume of the space to the orientation. A lot of things that we already do in design can help with emotional states. And something I've been learning more about is how do you design for neurodiversity, neuroinclusion, and taking a more scientific approach and how that can play into the design process. Because then you can pull some called quantitative data to kind of say, well, this shows how somebody might feel. What is a design principle that can help with that, make you feel better and make people feel safe in spaces?
That's fascinating. I'm more of a technical person
Mhm.
myself, so I'm not gonna claim to understand exactly how you can come to those conclusions by asking those questions, but I don't feel like a lot of architects do.
It it is, and I agree. I'm also more on the technical side, and it's in my mind, it's helped me relate more to clients. And so you want to go through program, you want to make sure that you're getting the spaces that fit the needs, that help the client achieve the goals that you were brought on to help them with. But really also, if it's a public space, what type of people do you envision being here? How do you want people to use the space? And they're not going to necessarily always react with, "Oh, we want people to feel this emotion." But by understanding how they are envisioning space to be used, you can start pulling from, okay, if this event were to happen and this group of people here, would it be a positive outcome? And something I've seen a lot more public buildings going to is that you want people to gather these places, community centers, civic buildings, even um, cultural areas. People want to be able to gather outside of their homes. And so you want to make it inviting, you want to make people feel comfortable there. And a lot of it does come into play with the design. And so being very mindful of you're not designing for yourself as the architect, you're designing for the end user, the clients, and people you may not have never even meet.
Interesting. Um, I'm gonna have to look into that more after this conversation. That's pretty cool. A lot of architects spend years mastering technical production, but leadership inside of a firm is an entirely different skill set. Since becoming associate partner at Studio Access, how has your perspective changed from focusing primarily on projects to helping shape teams, culture, and the direction of the practice itself?
It's helped me become a better architect. Graduating from Ball State, I work at Axis as my first job, and I've been here for just over 11 years. And so I've gone through the progression of a new graduate, becoming licensed, stepping into more of a project manager role, and now serving as an associate partner. And when you're managing projects, you're working with clients, you're working with consultants. I felt it was very much keeping them at ease, being able to know the answer within a timely manner, and then more and more understanding how to delegate work. And so kind of relinquishing control in a sense where you're not going to be the only person working on a project. And not that that was ever the case, but there are some things I really enjoy doing as more of a project manager. And now that I've grown into a leadership role, I can no longer solely do those. So learning how to delegate was really important. Knowing that we have a great team at Studio Access and making sure that people are given the same opportunities I was really helped my shift in thinking. And so, because I have joined the leadership team and that was something I've always wanted, and knowing that comes with separate responsibilities to running projects, it's really just let me be a little bit more open about how I can spread my knowledge and make people aware of opportunities that exist in leadership. Sometimes that may not always be very clear. And so if somebody is wanting to grow in the firm, how can we make it clear? Like here could be a pathway.
Mhm.
And it may be a singular pathway depending on the firm. It could be multiple different ways. You could create a role that you didn't even know existed, but if it's something you're really excited about, I want to make sure that somebody has the opportunity to say, can we explore this? Can I take this on? And so really trying to build up confidence of younger staff so that they can see themselves growing within the profession.
Gotcha. You talked about delegating and having to learn to delegate and having to give up control of some things. Was that a difficult thing to do?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is difficult. There's so many things I enjoy about being an architect, and I knew early on, even in school, that being a lead designer or sole designer was not one of them. That stressed me out in studio, coming up with a fresh idea right on my own. I really enjoy working with people. I like hearing different ideas and how to build upon them. And then taking the technical side, okay, here's the conceptual image, the conceptual thought. How can we make this realistic? How can we detail this so that it can be built? And so when I started at Studio Access, I really took on that project manager role quite early on, even before I was licensed, but I had great mentors that showed me, here's how you run a project. And so I became comfortable with running the project, managing everything, having support when needed. And then as more and more projects started, kind of coming to me, quickly understanding, well, I can't do everything. I want to be able to do as much as I can, but in order to make all these projects successful, realistically, I can't do it all. And so I've had a couple moments where it was like the aha, like, I really need to ask for help. And it's not even asking for help, it's just giving other people the opportunity to grow. And so I had to kind of come reconcile with what am I willing to delegate or what am I wanting to delegate so that I can focus on this instead. And it's still a little bit of a challenge, mostly because I need to remember that people are here to help, and so it's I'm trying not to be selfish, it's more of p I had so many wonderful opportunities as an emerging professional, early licensed architect that I don't want to miss out on giving those back
Sure.
on it too. And so, if somebody came to me and asked, "Hey, Ashley, can I coordinate with this consultant or can I take this on?" I am happy to do that. I'm trying to be more mindful to maybe tap somebody on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I think you could really do this. Like, I'm here to support you, but I would love for you to be the one to set up this coordination meeting or schedule me with clients to review the latest design iteration.
All right. So, being an associate partner now, was there a moment when it just kind of clicked in your head that you're no longer just designing buildings, you're actually helping design an organization?
Yes. So when I was interviewing for jobs when I was still in grad school, I knew at some point in my career I wanted to be part of owning a firm. Not necessarily as a sole proprietor, I wanted to be part of a partnership. And so in interviews with different jobs, you're asked, where do you see yourselves in, 5, 10 years? I said, eventually I would like to be a partner. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I know I want to have some investment in the firm and I want to be able to help lead the firm into the next however many years. And when we were doing our professional development, always kept bringing it up. What can I do? What do I need to improve on? Like, what's an opportunity I haven't had yet that could help me with this? And we were having a conversation, and I had in my mind, oh, maybe in a couple of years I could get this point. And they said, no, we think you're ready now,
Oh, wow.
and which I was flattered and very excited about. And I was like, great. Well, let's jump into it. And then coming to realizations like with leadership that means less involvement in the projects. And it's something that I thought initially it was, oh, I can still do everything I'm still doing. And every day it's proven that, things are always going to change. Things are going to be different. And I need to know what's best for me and for what's best for our studio. And so it will eventually mean, less involvement with the projects and more on the daily responsibilities, the operations of the firm. Until then, I like to still be on projects and I would eventually like to continue just knowing that the quantity will drop. But it has also helped drive my desire to learn how to be better at delegation. Knowing that I wanna get to a point sooner than later where I am able to pass off work, where I'm able to help train others to take on some of the responsibilities I currently have as a project manager, and not let it be "Oh, we waited too long," scrambling. I'm trying to prepare others to step into these positions because I know they're qualified, and I have a feeling that they want it as well, and so, kinda taking it project by project. If it's somebody I've worked with on multiple projects, it's each time giving them more responsibility. You can schedule these meetings. You can do the field observation reports. You can handle some of the daily communication, but keep me involved. I'm here to answer any questions. And so that's helped ease some of the transition. I still am highly involved with projects and I love doing that. Just knowing that in the future there probably will be a point that the balance may shift. Until
Gotcha.
then, I'll keep holding on to my project manager role.
You talked about how travel and studying architecture abroad helped you shape your understanding of how buildings respond to their surroundings. In an era where social media rewards flashy architecture and instantly recognizable aesthetics, how do you balance creating memorable work without letting the architect's ego overpower the context of the community or the site?
It really goes back to understanding what your client's needs are. As architects, we're brought on to help clients achieve their goals. They've selected us for a reason. They like how we make them feel. They like our design approach. They like our body of work. There's a reason why clients choose an architect. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we're understanding the purpose of the project, what is driving why it's happening now, or maybe it's why it's gonna happen in the future and help us plan for it. And it really has to do with the due diligence of what makes the most sense in this moment, in this context, but also be long lasting.
Mhm.
And so we go through series of precedent studies, both on the exterior design, the interior design. And while sometimes we may not agree with some of those selections, we have to remember we're bringing helping bring the client's project to life. And so it's having a conversation as to why do you like this roof form? Why do you like these materials? Why do you like this glazing style? And getting really good at asking questions. And if a client just says, it seems indifferent, making sure that we're kind of pushing a little bit, not overstepping, but trying to help them understand, why they made those selections. And so it, it is sometimes putting ego aside. we can still do great design even without it. Even if it's something where we've had conversations and the client's adamant this is the direction I want to go in, it's still our responsibility to deliver a strong project. And so that doesn't change our design approach at all. It just helps us really make sure that we take a step back saying, we're listening. This is what we're doing. We're understanding you and continue moving forward and keeping them updated so that they are still comfortable with the end product.
Gotcha. I'm assuming there has to be times when what the customer wants and what you guys know to be the right thing aren't always the same thing. Do you do you compromise? Do you try to guide them to what you see to be the right thing? How do you handle that?
So the right thing may be a little ambiguous.
Sure.
I think there's some things that we really know that some clients don't. Like when it comes to the health, safety, welfare, when it comes to code, there's some things that are just non-negotiable.
Sure.
Where it's going to be built. There's some things like if you wanted to do this, here's some of the code you have to follow unless you want to seek a variance. So that's kind of one discussion. There's some things we have to follow. Where there may be some compromises, may turn into some of the finishes used, some of the colors that you see in a building and space, even the form, for example. And so, it's really making sure you're having a collaborative conversation, understanding where a client's point of view may be coming from, and then still being able to give our own take. We wanna make sure that we're understanding, we can offer up suggestions, and there have been even times during as we progress through design, we're getting more into the detailing where it may not work as well as we want it to. Whether it's a concern from a different consultant, whether we're seeing a rising cost, we're trying to get ahead of these conversations. So by being able to have honest conversations with clients goes a long way. And they feel valued and that you're hearing their needs and they trust you to say, well, ultimately, this person's trying to do the best for me. And so there may be some compromising, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the client is getting what they're wanting. And so we do everything that we can to make sure that we're working through that. And if we do uh, get overcome, if we do face a challenge, we can have the conversations like, "Here's how we can get past this," and having options, and
Gotcha.
then working with them. It's really a team effort, both from the client and the architect and the entire design team at that point.
Gotcha. Is that something I mean, is that something your mentor taught you, or is that something you learned from experience, or a little bit of both? And are you actively I'm assuming you're actively teaching those same things to your team?
I would say a little bit of both. I have had wonderful mentors, and I still have mentors in my career. And when I started Access, I very early on was able to attend client meetings, consultant meetings, and being able to hear the information firsthand was extremely important. So, how you would approach those conversations, whether it's early on in design, understanding what the aesthetic of the building would be, to something came up in construction in the field, we need to pivot. Not ideal, but how do we put the best foot forward and continue? And um, being able to see how others have handled those conversations, and more importantly, how people have reacted to those conversations, has made me very mindful on how I approach the project. And it goes back to, I feel, emotional intelligence. It's always being kind, being able to have hard conversations as needed because it gets to the point more quickly. And at the end of the day, reminding everybody's on the team, we want to make sure that we're having a solution. And so things may pop up. And that's something I actually really enjoy about being involved with construction is that you have a drawing, you have a set of drawings, you've seen it built, and it may not always work out the way you had envisioned it. Being in the field allows you to see and learn from contractors more the means and methods. Like, here's how this maybe could have been improved, or this couldn't work because XYZ. And so it just helps me become better the next time. Say, okay, this is a situation that we had to overcome, and we know to plan for it differently next time on it too. And so a lot of it has been experiences, but really it's kind of seeing how people have been in situations before me and how I can then teach others if something comes up, here's how you can approach it. Because every day something new is gonna happen, and
Sure.
there's still days where it's, "Oh, I never thought I would experience this, but here we are." And it's really just kind of saying, "Okay, how can we find the best solution for the client. Let's move forward and kind of learn from your lessons.
Gotcha. Um, Speaking of teaching the younger architects, a lot of younger architects dream about designing museums, towers, or luxury homes, but civil architecture often has an outsized impact on people's daily lives.
Mhm.
Between public safety facilities, community based projects, and your involvement with organizations like Rebuilding Together Indianapolis, what keeps drawing you towards civic minded work, and why do you think it matters more than ever right now?
I believe everybody deserves good design, great design. And what's really important now is that people see buildings in their community that they're proud of, that they feel welcomed, that they feel safe in. What's really great about civic architecture is it really depends on where it's located. You can see different types of architecture from the past and start associating, what a city hall may look like, what a post office, what a fire station even looks like. But now you're really kind of seeing it really does adapt to its surrounding context, what the community wants, what the climate is telling you, what makes the most sense based on this on the site. And so it's really fascinating that these buildings can grow from maybe once was a stereotype association to something that somebody could say, this is my fire station, this is my library, this is my school. And just having that ownership, they feel I have a sense of belonging there. And that's to me really important about civic and any project, but really civic architecture, knowing that it is for the public and there's areas that the public could use if needed, that they are aware of it and they feel, "Okay, I can go there. I recognize that this is an icon in the community. I realize this is somewhere I can go if I'm experiencing this, or I wanna try something new." And so it's really going back to how people see it in their community that makes it such a wonderful project and a really sector type to be involved with.
I'm going to bring up a topic that everybody talks about, but I think you might have a different take: sustainability. Every architecture firm talks about sustainability now. I have that conversation in multiple podcast episodes. But the real challenges usually comes from when sustainability goals collide with budgets, politics, timelines, or operational realities. From your experience on real projects, where do sustainability conversations most commonly break down? And what separates projects that genuinely commit to it from projects where it's mostly just marketing language?
Where I see sustainability conversations break down is in the middle of design if conversations were not had early on. Meaning, if you're going through conceptual planning, you're going through programming, we always ask, what are sustainable goals for the project? At CUXis, we design above code. Well, ask any architect in Indiana, the code's not great, it's outdated. We feel it's our duty to make sure that the buildings are long lasting and we hold ourselves to a higher code and we have that conversation with clients. We want to be able to have a building that will perform well, whether that's the building envelope, whether that's the mechanical systems used. And so early on, having those conversations, asking what are their goals? Do they want us to explore solar panels? Do they want us to explore geothermal? Are there other design approaches that we can take to help them with that? We found that some clients do already have sustainability goals that they say, we must meet this certification, we must have this in place. And that's great knowing early on. We can plan for it. And then some clients just don't know. Some clients are say that, that sounds great. And then you're working to a design and it may be a budget issue that comes up like, oh, well, we can't afford that. And so then it's our job to explain, well, here's the value of this. Here can be your return on investments. Here's why we believe you should include this. And then really it's part of the education of the client, talking through what the process is. And so it's really critical having those discussions up front. If you have a client, you're midway through construction documents and they're saying, well, we're going to achieve LEED certification on this, right? You've never had the conversation. It's very hard to kind of work backwards to get there. And so some clients see sustainability as a buzzword because they hear it and
Mhm.
they don't understand it. And so that's why our job is to really talk through what that means to their building, what that means for them as a client. on there. And then there's items that we incorporate in our design process that are already sustainable measures. And so it's really asking, if there's anything beyond that they're looking to seek, and making sure that we can get that incorporated from a timeline, from a budget, from a stakeholder buy-in even.
So what I'm hearing is that sustainability is one of those conversations that begins at the very beginning, like even in like fact finding conversations when you guys are when clients come to you, it starts at the very beginning, and then it's just an ongoing conversation the entire
It's an
process.
ongoing conversation, and so depending on the outcome of those early talks, the direction that you're going into, it's really important. Like anything else, you're keeping track of the goals. Um, this depending on, if you are seeking a certification, that would bring on other consultants to help with those measurements, with those time frames to make sure that you're taking the right approach. If you have a client that maybe wishes to have the benefits of some sustainability certification without actual certification, that's a little bit tricky because it's almost like, well, let's go ahead, let's have a certification, and maybe there's a reason why, and that's another conversation that can be had. But it is really important to keep sight of this throughout the entire design, even in construction. It's never a conversation you have just once. Okay, let's move on. It has to be part of the design process. It has to be part of the design results. And so when you're managing a project, it's really my responsibility to make sure, okay, we're still on track with these goals. And if the goals change in the project, how do you work through them? Is there a point where it's easy to pivot, or is there a point where you may have a conversation like, okay, we're here and this can now affect schedule or cost? And then again, being honest with the clients, they can take that information and choose to move in whichever direction makes the most sense for them.
Gotcha. Um, you've mentioned mentorship as something that works in both directions, which is refreshing because a lot of firms still treat mentorship like a top-down hierarchy. Uh, what are younger architects and interns bringing into the profession right now that you think older generations might be underestimating? And what do you wish emerging designers understood earlier about the realities of practice?
What I'm seeing from a lot of younger professionals entering the practice is that they have a sense of technology that others may not have. I was fortunate in school. We had our laptops, we had access to Revit, we understood modeling software, SketchUp, Rhino, and we're still using those in our practice. Younger generations seem to have more of an insight on rendering softwares,
Mhm.
whether that's working through editing, whether it's doing full renders that once upon a time took hours, even days, and now can be done in minutes. It's working through, how can we be more efficient in workflow? Is there something that we feel we're doing every single project that can be a little bit more simplified? And I think that's where coding comes into play. Um, it's it's even different priorities where you're seeing with people. It's how they're choosing to be engaged in a project, how they're wanting to grow. I feel maybe they're a little bit more vocal about what they want, which is great. I was a little reserved when I started. I knew what I wanted, but sometimes I had difficulty expressing that to mentors, to project managers. And so it's really nice when you have a younger staff member saying, I really want to learn how to read a code review summary. It's like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And so having somebody take on the initiative and kind of just asking, can I do this? And even if the answer is no, okay, they might ask again. And so I think that's really refreshing with that. At the same time, what I wish maybe more people knew before they enter the practice is the business side of architecture. And that's something universities are getting better at teaching. But even if you are not a firm owner or a leadership member, I really believe there's parts of the business that everybody should be aware of. Understanding what proposals say, understanding what contracts mean. How do we engage with clients from that perspective and working through it, and that the design balances out the business side, and the business side also means having the soft skills. How do you communicate with somebody?
Mm.
How can you be a great listener? How can you make somebody feel comfortable? I still consider that as part of business skills as well. And so it's the human interactions, the in-person, even if it's over email or phone conversations. You're always going to have a client. And so really understanding like how to present anything to them is something I think is extremely valuable.
Um, when you talk about technology, it's to me anyways, it's obvious that there is a benefit to the old schoolers
Mhm.
learning how to use Revit and AutoCAD and all the new software. Is there any benefit to the younger generation uh, to sit at the drafting table once in a while?
Yeah, definitely. Hand sketching goes a long way. It's quick, it's efficient, it's easy if you're sitting just by yourself or even in a group to get an idea out of your mind. Technology can be limiting. Revit, while it's great for production and for documentation, it's not the most design friendly tool.
Gotcha.
So if you're starting something new, it has its limiting factors, like any software. And so there's still a great value in just being able to draw on trace paper, even if it's messy, it's simple, but just talking through a conversation. And even in meetings, you're showing something to a client and you can tell they're having a hard time visualizing it, whether it's a floor plan or a 3D view. And then just by sitting next to them and having a piece of paper out and kind of walking through it, diagrammatic even, okay, that makes sense because you're hearing what they're saying, and while you could bring up Revit in a meeting and make those change, being able to just quickly kinda get a point across goes a long way, and then you can go and make the changes on it. That's I feel, a really great reminder. So many times you're just excited to get going on a project, you wanna jump into Revit, to any software, but it is also really important to kinda take a moment of pause and just kind of sketch it out. I mean, there's people who I've seen, like, I don't consider myself to be a talented sketcher, but there's some people who even a very quick, like, beautiful. And it's really clear what the concept is, and I wish people did that more.
So, I mean, that may be an obvious reason to an architect to learn how to sketch, sitting down with clients and places. But to people like me who are never in those meetings, that's fascinating. That's really cool. Um, one project that stood out to me was the Trades District Technology Center in Bloomington. Especially the way that public plaza wasn't just treated as leftover space, but also became part of the site's stormwater detention strategy. That's the kind of move most people would never notice unless they dug in the project documents. When you're solving technical constraints like that, do you enjoy finding opportunities to hide infrastructure inside placemaking moments? Almost like architecture rewarding people for paying attention?
It is fun. So with the Trades Technology Center, which is now called the Forge, that was an interesting project. It's located in Bloomington, just north of the city hall, and the project came about through an EDA grant, the Economic Development Administration federal grant that the city of Bloomington was awarded. And due to the size of the site and what they wanted to build on it, and working with the city regulations, on-site detention was a requirement. With it being an urban site, there wasn't already a detention pond nearby that we could tie into. And so knowing that the building was going to be a certain footprint size, and knowing we had to have a certain amount of pervious, impervious space on site, what made the most sense was to have the detention system underneath the pavers in the plaza, right up front. And it was a challenge understanding how deep we can go. Soils weren't great, and working with the city on what they were comfortable with. And part of it was some things they never really experienced before. We also had a green roof on the structure, and we were able to use that system to help with the water retention as well. So it's not just underneath the plaza, but it was on the roof as well, and understanding how the water was being captured, and meeting the requirements. And it was a lot of innovative thinking with our consultants and having conversations with the city on, okay, your goal is to have this building. This is the site limitation. Here are the regulations we're following. Will you accept this creative approach? And it was quite a few meetings with the plan commission, with the utilities, but we got there because we said, "We know your goal, and here's a different way of looking at it." And I felt they really appreciated us pushing them in that sense, and not just saying, "We can't do it," because a client doesn't wanna hear you say, "We can't do it." It's, "You have a challenge. Let's think outside the the box and present a new way to achieve the same goal on it.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, when that idea came up, was it sort of like uh, well, yeah, that makes sense. We should do it this way, or is it more like that's brilliant?
A little bit of both. I think it
Yeah.
depends on who you're asking to. I think it was a aha moment,
Mm.
like, "Oh, yes, how have we not thought of this before?" But then immediately it was like, "What's it gonna take for this to happen?" Because it was something that really hadn't been done too much before, and not only how it would impact the site that we were building on, but adjacent sites. Could this set future sites up for success? At the time, the parcel that we were building on, we split a parcel into 2 different lots, and then there was a lot of open space around it that I'm sure the city has plans to build, and so with this building kind of being the first one there, it's, well, how do we meet the needs of the building, but also anticipate any other infrastructure? So that is there something that the city, and this kind of goes for any project, is there something that can be incorporated this project to ease demands for the surrounding context on it?
Gotcha. Cool. Um, have you guys used that same idea since,
I l
or
I
similar?
like similar ideas like that. Detention ponds aren't always the most wonderful thing to look at.
That's fair.
You mean they serve their purpose. We know we need it, and so when we're doing the site test fits, if we are able to help the client select the sites, that's always something we bring up. I mean, we bring it up regardless. But when selecting a site, we try to make sure that it's the parcel that they're purchasing, looking at, allows room to work through their goals. There's been some instances where there's already a site and it's very challenging to have on-site detention because it does take up, I feel, more space than you initially think. And that in some instances could cause a building to go multiple stories when it was really intended to be one. Or you have to find, bring utilities there that are a little bit longer away. And so it really is, with architecture and early on design, there's so much from a site contextual point of view that really needs to be considered. And that was something I had to learn. It's not just, oh, here's how the building's going to fit. It makes sense. It fits everything. It's okay. Well, how do you take parking in consideration if it's needed? The on-site detention, other site influences that maybe aren't being thought of in the moment, but it's still part of the due diligence to see if it works. So you don't the last thing you wanna do is have a client say, "Okay, here's a site." You do a test fit, "Oh, this works," and then you realize, "Oh, we didn't take this into consideration." So, and which is why it's really important in this due diligence, this programming phase, to have those conversations, to ask, what's needed, and to also be familiar with local jurisdictions, what they require, because that's going to be different depending on where you're building. Not every town, not every city is going to be the same, and so it's really important to familiarize yourselves with what's going to be required and making sure that your project's fitting within those regulations.
Gotcha. So what I'm getting is that initial conversations seem pretty comprehensive.
Yes, very,
Yes.
very important. I strongly feel you can never over communicate. It's really important to get everything out there, really understand how to make a client open up and keep track of that and just be there to listen and to deliver on what they're wanting.
I think it's great advice across a lot of different industries.
Yes.
Yeah. You've gone through leadership programs, professional organizations, public speaking, and increasingly visible roles within AIA Indiana, which means you've seen the gap between academia and professional reality pretty clearly. What's something architectural school still fails to prepare students for that hits them like a freight train once they enter practice? And you can't say business because you've already said it.
Can I say communication?
Yes,
A part of it? I mean,
absolutely.
communication is huge. One 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 of the biggest differences I have seen, I personally have experienced from school to the practice is you're rarely working on something just by yourself. I say rarely if you're, there may be some instances, but school, it felt very much individual based. As different studios emerged, you may be in groups, whether it's a two-person team, a multiple person team. In my experience as an architect, I've never done something solely on my own. It's never been only mine. It's a team efforts. And it's really important to know how to communicate with different team members. And that's not only the people outside your firm, but also the consultants as well. knowing how to get a point across in a very pointed professional manner, it goes a long way. If we can have conversations and resolve issues sooner than later, that's really impactful. And it's not being afraid to stand up for what you believe in and to have direct conversations. Again, in a professional manner. It doesn't mean you're coming off as aggressive. And for a long time, I struggled with that. If I felt I was speaking out, oh, am I coming off as wanting to, be in conflict with somebody? Or is it just I see a different perspective, I wanna make sure that we're exploring all options. And so, I mean, just communication, I really believe you can never communicate enough. You may overshare, but communicating, is very critical in any aspect of the profession and beyond that, and, just in the world in general.
Gotcha. So basically, how to tell somebody their idea is a bad idea without telling them it's a bad idea.
Find a way to if that's something they're really wanting to hone in on, it kind of turning it around, saying like, "Well, explain it to me." Like, what is something that really excites you about this? And that they can stand behind it. And I mean, that's what I wanna hear is if you have an idea, explain to me why you're excited about it. I might not agree with it, but at least I can understand the thinking that comes with it, and
Mm.
I understand it. I think that's also really important is not just saying you like something just to say you like it. It's, like how explaining, what is it about it in a sense. And so that if you're hearing somebody explain a project, an idea, you're starting to see the passion behind it, and that goes a long way. Again, you may not agree with it, but you can see why this is important to that person, and you can start making that connection.
That's cool. I'm going to steal that for my own leadership skills. I'm not. This isn't about me, but I'm not a super patient person. So sitting and asking somebody what excites them about something that you completely disagree with sounds like a great way to do it. I just need to remind myself to be patient and listen to what they have to say. So no, I'll take that. Thank you. Um, Public expectations around buildings are changing rapidly. People now expect civic buildings to be sustainable, technologically integrated, emotionally welcoming, operationally efficient, and somehow delivered under shrinking budgets. Looking ahead 10 to 15 years, how do you think civic and public safety architecture is going to evolve?
Mhm.
And what trends do you think the industry still isn't taking seriously enough, besides our 15-year-old code?
That's a really good question. I would love in 10, 15 years for the public to really have more ownership in civic buildings. And that means having to an extent, and I'll explain why I say this, what it looks like.
Mm.
What I found really valuable in projects, and this doesn't work for every project, is by having community engagement sessions so that you can hear concerns around the area about anything. And sometimes they're difficult conversations. I mean, you can be told like this won't work because of this. And you can't really understand why they're taking that perspective in the moment. But I think having people have a say in what it looks like and given the opportunity helps them understand what architects do. That continues to be a struggle on explaining what architecture is, maybe sometimes to a layperson, and it's helping them be part of the process. And so whether it's a community engagement session, whether it's working with a client who has never gone through a design process for in their life or a client who has done it multiple times, it's still bringing back the importance of why they're bringing on an architect to help them achieve their goals
Mhm.
and how we can make our profession a little bit more transparent in the work that we're doing, the importance of us having a say in the design. I mean, one item that's really great about civic architecture is it helps us connect back to the community, even if it's not our own that we live in,
Mhm.
but it helps us get involved with the issues that they're seeing and how the building may not be able to solve all of them. If they can solve one, then that's really successful. And so I would love for people to still be proud of the buildings in their area, be proud of civic architecture, want to see these buildings, want to go in them, even if it's just to kind of glance inside. Um, Being proud and understanding that really it is a reflection of them, that it's not just, "Here's a building here that has no relation to anything around, but we needed it, and it's just an eyesore." But something that they're saying, like, we really value this building and we can see ourselves being around it, enjoy walking around it, or enjoy being inside of it.
What are some trends do you think the industry still isn't taking seriously enough?
One area, and I don't know if it's a trend, but one area I feel the architectural profession can improve upon is having a better working relationship with contractors.
Okay.
Depending on your project delivery method, the contractor could be the last person in the design process, meaning the project's gone out to bid, the contractor's been awarded the project, they're taking over to make the project come to life based on your drawings. If they're really well coordinated drawings, if they're not well coordinated drawings, so much happens in construction that I feel everybody needs to experience to become a better designer, become a better architect. Any chance we can have to talk with a contractor early on, I see a lot of value in it. If the project's delivered through a construction manager, having them involved with the design process, to be a sounding board, but also to help understand where the market is from a cost estimating. And a great relationship would be the contractor understanding the same goals of the client, the design approach, and not trying to limit that, but just trying to be a resource to say, okay, here's where we think things are going. How can we make sure that we're getting the same design and really working on a partnership? So many times I feel there can be a stereotype about architects and contractors not getting along.
Mm.
A lot of it could lead to communication. I do see a lot of value in having a contractor on board early and having a great relationship with the entire design team and with the client side so that you can all work together and get ahead of some challenges that maybe you would have a little bit more difficulty if somebody wasn't there early on. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. Contractors, they're the ones actually building, and they could talk about means and methods and really help architects understand, what works really well without compromising on design. In the same way as architects talk with contractors, being able to explain the reasoning behind some moves. We're
Sure.
kind of talking through the design intent and the process, and that it's not being stubborn, but really having an open conversation. I think that's something that we can all do better of. And um, as a profession, any chance we can engage with contractors, really trying to make that bridge happen to deliver more successful projects that are on time, that are on budgets, and again, still achieve the same goals that the client had initially.
That's a fantastic answer, and let me tell you why.
Yes.
The last person I interviewed for the podcast was a general contractor, and he mirrored your sentiment almost exactly, but from the GC side.
Yeah.
He said, get in there, talk to the architects early, keep that conversation going throughout the whole process. Pretty much everything you just said. That's really cool.
I think it's something we take for granted that, from maybe an architect's perspective that a good contractor can make or break a project. But there's so much that we can learn and defining what a good contractor is up for interpretation. But then it also kind of does some reflection like, what could I have done to better this situation? Could I have asked questions early on? Could I have detailed this differently? And so being open to having those conversations, when you're both coming from a place of we really want to make this successful, and it's not to critique one another, it's not to point fingers if something goes wrong, but it's really understanding what makes the most sense. To me, both sides are just gaining knowledge. And why wouldn't you want that?
Sure.
And so I think it's just being maybe vulnerable and having those conversations, but also explaining to the client maybe the importance of having a contractor on board early, exploring different project delivery methods. And they may say they choose to want to deliver it one way, and you've asked, but that's something I feel architects can be better about advocating for.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you so much for giving your time. Thank you for sharing your insights and experience.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.